Soft rain falling, faint piano plays. It was 11:47 p.m. The rain outside was heavy, and her phone wouldn't stop ringing. Mom. That name kept flashing on the screen again and again. She looked at it, sighed, and turned it face down. Not tonight, Mom, she whispered. She was exhausted. 2 jobs, overdue rent, and a heart full of things she never said. Sound of phone vibrating again. Somewhere miles away, an old woman sat beside her bed, clutching that same phone, hoping her daughter would answer.
Just one last time.
11:58 p.m. The rain grew louder. The phone stopped ringing, and the silence stayed. Fade into morning sounds. Her alarm went off at 7 a.m. Half asleep, she reached for her phone. 5 missed calls from Mom. She smiled tiredly. I'll call her back later. But before she could, the phone buzzed again. An unknown number this time. She picked up. A soft voice said, "Are you her daughter? I'm sorry, but your mother passed away last night." Everything around her went silent. The world blurred. Her heartbeat slowed. She could hear nothing except her own breath. She dropped the phone. Tears fell before words could. Her mind replayed every conversation she'd cut short. Every "Mom, I'm busy." Every ignored call that she thought didn't matter. That evening, she opened her mother's last message. "I know you're busy, sweetheart. I just wanted to hear your voice." She read it again and again, as if maybe the words would change. But they didn't. Nothing ever would. Later that night, she called her mother's number, just to hear it ring. The line went straight to voicemail. "Hi, this is Mom. Leave me a message." Her voice cracked as she whispered, "I'm sorry, Mom. I should have picked up." The call disconnected. The silence returned. But this time, it wasn't peaceful. It was empty. Soft piano fades out. It was almost midnight. The rain outside was heavy, tapping against her window like the world was trying to remind her of something she'd forgotten. Her phone kept lighting up beside her bed. Mom. She glanced at it once, twice, 3 times. She saw it, but she didn't pick up. She was tired. Tired of working 2 jobs. Tired of pretending everything was okay. Tired of being the strong one all the time. She whispered to herself, "Not tonight, Mom. I just need to rest." And she turned her phone face down. Miles away, in a small, quiet room, her mother sat alone, holding that same phone close to her chest, waiting for her daughter's voice. The clock hit midnight. The rain grew louder. And then the phone stopped ringing. Silence filled both rooms. The next morning, sunlight touched her face. She reached for her phone, still half asleep. 5 missed calls from Mom. She smiled faintly. She thought, "I'll call her back after work." But before she could, the phone buzzed again. It wasn't her mom this time. A soft voice said, "Are you her daughter? I'm sorry, your mother passed away last night." Her hands froze. Her world stopped. The city noise outside faded into nothing. She couldn't breathe. She just kept hearing that voice in her head, her mom's laugh, her gentle words, asking if she was eating, if she was okay. And all she could think was, "I didn't answer. I didn't answer when she needed me." That evening, she opened her mom's last message. It said, "I know you're busy, sweetheart. I just wanted to hear your voice." She read it again, until the words blurred behind her tears. Later that night, she called her mom's number, just to hear it ring. Voicemail answered, "Hi, this is Mom. Leave me a message." Her voice cracked. She whispered, "I'm sorry, Mom. I should have picked up." And for the first time in her life, she realized the sound of silence can break your heart more than words ever could. She sat there on the cold wooden floor, phone still in her hand, as the rain outside began to slow. Every drop that hit the window felt like an echo of something she'd lost forever. The city kept moving, cars passed, people laughed, but for her, time had stopped somewhere between those missed calls. Her apartment was filled with things she'd been too busy to notice. A family photo half covered with dust, a voicemail she never listened to, a birthday card from her mom she never opened. She picked it up now, trembling fingers tracing the handwriting. "Love you always, Mom." She pressed the card to her chest and cried until her body ached. All the memories she tried to hide came flooding back. Her mom waiting outside the school when she was late, her voice singing while cooking, her hands fixing everything that broke. And now there was no one left to say, "It's okay, honey, you'll be fine." She realized that somewhere in the noise of life, she had let love slip through the cracks. Days passed, but the guilt didn't. She went to work, smiled at people, pretended to be normal, but every time a phone rang, her heart raced. Sometimes she'd pick it up just to hear a stranger's voice, hoping for something that felt like forgiveness. At night, she scrolled through old pictures, her mom's smile, the way her eyes lit up when she laughed. She whispered, "I'm sorry," to the empty room, knowing no one was there to answer. One evening, while walking home, she saw an elderly woman struggling with grocery bags in the rain. Without thinking, she ran to help. The woman smiled and said, "You remind me of my daughter." Those words hit her like lightning. She stood there frozen for a moment, then smiled back with tears in her eyes and said, "I hope she never misses your call." From that day on, she started answering every phone call, every message. She checked on friends, called her aunt, texted her coworkers just to say hi. And every time she heard the phone ring, she paused, breathed, and remembered, somewhere, there was once a voice she ignored that would have given anything just to hear hers. Some wounds never heal, they just teach you how to live differently. She still keeps her mom's number saved. Sometimes, late at night, she calls it. It goes straight to voicemail, but she still speaks softly into the silence. "Hi, Mom, it's me. I'm doing better now. I hope you can hear me." The line clicks, the rain starts again, and her heart feels a little lighter, not because the pain is gone, but because she's finally learned what love really means, to never let a moment, or a voice, slip away unspoken. The rain had stopped, but the sky was still gray, the kind of gray that makes the world feel quiet and heavy. She sat on her balcony, wrapped in her mother's old shawl, the one that still carried the faint scent of lavender. She hadn't been back to her hometown since the funeral. She was afraid of walking through those familiar streets, of seeing the old porch where her mom used to sit every evening, waiting. But a part of her knew she couldn't keep running from the memories forever. A week later, she packed a small bag and boarded a train. The journey felt endless. Every stop brought a rush of faces, laughter, families talking, things she no longer had. She stared out of the window, the world blurring by, and wondered how many other people were too busy to pick up a call, too distracted to say, "I love you." When she finally reached the small town, the air smelled different, cleaner, softer. The old house stood there just the same, a little more worn, the paint fading, but still holding every piece of her childhood. She unlocked the door, and the silence inside greeted her like an old friend. She looked around, the chair where her mom used to sit, the kitchen where they laughed, the photo frames lined with years she had taken for granted. She found her mother's favorite mug still on the counter, a book half-read beside it. She sat down, touched the pages, and closed her eyes. "I'm home, Mom," she whispered. Hours passed. She walked through each room, touching the walls, remembering the warmth that once filled them. In her mother's bedroom, she found a small wooden box on the nightstand. Inside were letters, some written, some never sent. Her mom had written to her. Words filled with love, advice, pride, and longing. One letter stopped her breath. Dear my little girl, I know life is hard for you right now. I see how tired you are, how you're fighting to build your world. I don't want to be another problem in your busy life. I just want to hear your voice. That's enough for me. Love, Mom. She broke down completely. Tears soaked the paper. Her chest felt tight, her heart screaming for one more chance that would never come. She stayed there, holding the letter to her chest until the sun set and the room turned golden with evening light. The next morning, she walked to the small cemetery at the edge of town. Her hands trembled as she placed fresh lilies on her mother's grave. She sat down on the damp grass and whispered, I used to think I was too busy to call. Now I'd give everything for one more minute with you. The wind moved softly through the trees. She felt a warmth on her face, the kind that doesn't come from the sun but from something you can't see. It felt like her mother's touch. She stayed there for hours, talking to her, telling her everything she had kept inside, her fears, her regrets, her small victories, her lonely nights. And though no one answered, somehow it felt like someone was listening. When she left, she felt lighter. She knew the pain would never vanish completely, but it had turned into something else, a reminder. From that day, she lived differently.
She slowed down.
She called her friends back. She spent time with people she loved. She learned to listen, to care, to be present. Sometimes, late at night, she still dreams of her mom calling her name. In the dream, she always picks up. They talk, they laugh, they say everything they never got to say. And when she wakes up, there are tears in her eyes, but also a small smile. Because now, she finally understands love isn't just about being there when it's easy. It's about answering when it matters most. And though her mom is gone, her voice still lives inside her, gentle, kind, and forever saying, I just wanted to hear your voice. She moved back to the city after a few weeks, but everything felt different now. The streets that once seemed loud and busy now sounded hollow, almost too fast for her heart to keep up. She began noticing things she never did before, a mother holding her child's hand while crossing the road, an old man sitting alone in a cafe, staring at his phone, waiting for a call that might never come. She saw herself in all of them. Every night, before going to bed, she'd scroll through her contact list and stop at her mom's name. She couldn't bring herself to delete it. It was the only thing that made her feel like her mom was still somewhere close, just one call away. Sometimes she'd dial the number, just to hear the voicemail. That familiar voice saying, Hi, this is Mom, was both comforting and cruel. Comforting because it was still there, cruel because it reminded her that the real voice was gone. One evening, while walking home from work, she passed a small flower shop. She used to walk past it every day without noticing, but that day something made her stop. Inside, a kind old woman smiled and said, You look like someone who could use a flower. She bought a small white rose, held it all the way home, and placed it beside her mother's picture. It became a quiet ritual, one flower every week. She never missed a week. The months rolled by. The pain softened, but never disappeared. It became part of her, like a scar that stopped bleeding but still ached when it rained. One night, while cleaning her apartment, she found her old voicemail inbox. She pressed play. There it was, her mom's voice from months ago, saying, Just checking on you, sweetheart. I miss you. Call me when you can. Her knees gave out, and she sat on the floor crying. But this time, the tears weren't just from pain. They were from love, from gratitude, from finally understanding what that simple message really meant. After that night, she started recording voice notes for herself, messages about how she felt, what she was learning, what she wanted to remember. She said things like, Don't forget to breathe, and call the people you love before it's too late. She didn't realize it at first, but She was slowly becoming the voice her mother used to be, gentle, patient, forgiving. A year passed. On her mother's birthday, she decided to do something she had avoided for too long. She called her aunt, her mom's sister, and asked if she could visit. When she arrived, her aunt hugged her tightly and whispered, "She talked about you every day, you know. She never blamed you. She was just proud." They sat together for hours, sharing stories, laughter, and tears. It was the first time in a long time that she felt peace instead of guilt. That night, she wrote in her journal, "I used to think regret was something that destroys you, but maybe it's something that teaches you how to love better. Maybe it's not about what you missed, it's about what you learn never to miss again." From then on, she began volunteering at a hospice once a week. She'd sit with lonely patients who had no one to talk to. She'd listen to their stories, hold their hands, and remind them they weren't alone. Every time she left that place, she'd look up at the sky and whisper, "I did something good today, Mom." Years went by, and though her hair grew longer, her eyes still carried the same softness her mother once had. She built a new life, a quieter one, filled with meaning. She didn't chase time anymore, she lived it. She found comfort in simple things: morning coffee, evening rain, late-night talks with friends, the sound of laughter echoing in her apartment. Sometimes, when she heard a phone ringing in another room, her heart still skipped a beat, just for a second. And even now, when she picks up, she always starts with the same words, spoken softly, almost like a prayer. "Hi, I'm here. I'm listening." Because deep down, she knows that's what her mom had always wanted. Someone to listen. Someone to care. Someone to simply be there. And though her mother's voice is gone from this world, its echo still lives inside her heart, whispering through every moment of silence, "You finally answered." Years later, she had built a peaceful life for herself, a small apartment with warm lights, a little balcony full of plants, and a job she genuinely loved. She'd wake up early, make coffee, and sit quietly, watching the sunrise. There was a softness in her mornings now, a stillness she once ran from but had learned to cherish. But even with the calm, there were moments when the past came back uninvited, like an old song you didn't choose to play. Sometimes it was a scent, a sound, or just a stranger's voice that reminded her of her mother. One autumn morning, she found an old photo album while cleaning her closet. Dust covered the corners, and the pages were slightly torn. Inside were memories she'd forgotten: her first day of school, her birthday parties, her mom's smile captured in sunlight. She spent hours flipping through the pages, laughing and crying at the same time. Every picture told a story she had once taken for granted. And for the first time in years, she didn't feel pain. She felt gratitude, pure, simple gratitude that she got to be loved that way, even if only for a while. As time passed, she started writing letters to her mom, not to send, but to feel close. She wrote about her days, her struggles, her tiny victories. She'd leave them by the window and imagine the wind carrying them somewhere beyond. One night, while writing, she caught herself smiling. Not because the pain was gone, but because it had changed her, taught her empathy, patience, and a love that didn't need words. Life, however, has a way of bringing things full circle. One evening, while leaving work, she noticed a young girl sitting on the bus stop bench, crying quietly into her phone. Something about her felt familiar: the tired eyes, the trembling voice. She hesitated for a moment, then sat beside her and gently said, "Whatever it is, it's going to be okay. Trust me." The girl looked up, surprised by the kindness of a stranger, and for a second, she saw herself, years ago, when no one had told her that. After that night, She started reaching out more, calling her friends, checking on coworkers, sending random messages that said, "Just thinking of you." She didn't want anyone to feel the kind of silence she once drowned in. It became her quiet mission to answer the calls she once ignored, to show up where she once didn't. One rainy evening, she sat by her window, a cup of tea in her hands, watching droplets race down the glass. She thought about how everything had started, that one missed call, that one night that changed everything. And somehow she smiled. Not the forced kind, but the kind that comes from peace. She whispered softly, "Mom, I finally understand. You weren't calling to talk. You were calling to remind me to live." The room was silent except for the rain, but in that silence, she felt something, a warmth, a presence, like her mother was sitting right beside her. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath. The air smelled like jasmine, her mom's favorite scent. And for the first time in forever, she didn't feel alone. She whispered, "I miss you, but I'm okay now." And if you were standing outside her window that night, you might have seen it, the faintest glow in the room, a calmness that didn't come from the lamp or the rain, but from something deeper, something eternal. Because sometimes love doesn't end when someone's gone, it just changes where it lives. And in her case, it lived quietly inside her heartbeat, in every answered call, in every small kindness she shared with the world, the kind her mother once gave her. Soft piano fades out, raindrops slow, silence fills the air. Then one last line. If you still have your mom, answer. Not because she might need you, but because one day you'll need to remember that you did. Time passed softly, like pages turning in an old book. Her life found rhythm again, gentle, steady, calm. Every morning she'd wake before the sun, sit by her window with a cup of coffee, and let the first light fall across her mother's picture. She didn't talk much these days. She didn't need to. Silence had become her language. She had learned to listen to the hum of the city, the sound of birds, the quiet voice inside her that once trembled. But one morning, as she scrolled through her phone, she saw an old notification she had never opened. It was a voicemail from her mom, dated 2 days before she died. Her heart froze. Her thumb hovered over the play button for what felt like forever. Then, trembling, she pressed it. Her mother's voice came through, faint, a little tired, but warm. "Hey, sweetheart, I know you're busy. I just wanted to hear your voice. It's silly, but I miss you even when I know you're fine. Call me when you can, okay?" She sat there, listening to it again and again, until tears blurred her vision. It wasn't just the words, it was the tone. That gentle patience, that unconditional love, waiting quietly on the other side of silence. She clutched the phone to her chest and whispered, "I'm sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry." For days, that voicemail played in her mind like a melody she couldn't turn off. She started recording it, saving it in different formats, terrified of losing it. It became her anchor, the last remaining bridge between what was and what would never be again. One evening, as she was walking home from work, the city lights reflecting on wet streets, she passed a group of musicians playing under a bridge. One of them was singing softly, an old song about missing someone. She stopped, listening, her heart aching in a strange, beautiful way. The singer noticed her and smiled, and she dropped a few dollars into the open guitar case. The next day, she returned to the same spot. The same group was there, and again she stopped to listen. This time the singer asked, "You okay?" She nodded, but her eyes said otherwise. They talked for a while, nothing deep, just small talk about music, the weather, the city. But it was the first real conversation she'd had with a stranger in months. As the weeks went by, she kept visiting. She'd sit quietly on the edge of the bridge, listening to songs about loss and love and everything in between. Somehow, it became her therapy. The music spoke the words she couldn't say out loud. One night, when they asked if she wanted to sing something, she hesitated, then nodded. Her voice was soft, trembling at first, but honest. She sang a lullaby her mother used to hum when she couldn't sleep. The city noise faded. The world went still. Even the streetlights seemed to glow warmer. After that, she started singing more often, not for others but for herself. Every song carried a memory, every note a piece of healing. She didn't realize it, but the crowd started growing. Strangers began stopping by every evening just to hear her voice. Someone even uploaded one of her songs online, and it spread quietly, finding hearts that understood her pain. One comment on that video read, "I lost my mom too. Your voice feels like home." She stared at it for a long time, then whispered, "Maybe that's what she wanted me to do, to turn pain into something that heals." Months later, she was invited to perform at a small local cafe. She almost said no. Fear still lived in the corners of her heart, but something inside told her she should. The night of the performance, the room was small, the lights dim, the air heavy with anticipation. She walked onto the tiny stage, her hands shaking. She looked at the mic, then at the empty seat in the front row where she imagined her mother sitting, smiling. And when the music began, she didn't just sing. She spoke through every note, every breath, every pause. The song was about missed calls, second chances, and the kind of love that never really leaves. By the time she finished, the room was silent, the kind of silence that holds emotion too deep for applause. Then slowly, people began clapping, some with tears in their eyes. That night, she walked home under the same bridge where it all began. She looked up at the sky and whispered, "We did it, Mom. We finally talked." The wind blew softly, carrying the scent of jasmine. She smiled through her tears. For the first time in years, she didn't feel haunted by what she missed. She felt guided by it. Years went by quietly, the seasons changing like gentle waves against the shore. Her music became part of her life now, not as a career, but as something sacred, a bridge between what she lost and what she found. Every Friday evening, she sang at the same cafe, the one where she had first faced her fears. People came from all over the city, not for the performance, but for the feeling, that warmth that came from her voice, like a whisper of someone they once loved. She never talked much about her mother on stage, but everyone could feel her presence in every song. One evening, after her set, a young man approached her. His eyes were red, his hands trembling slightly as he said, "My mom passed away last month. I didn't answer her last message, but your song, it made me call my dad tonight." She smiled softly, tears rising in her eyes, and placed a hand over his. "That's what love does," she said. "It keeps finding a way to speak, even through strangers." That night, she walked home under the streetlights, thinking about how pain connects people in ways comfort never could. She realized something. Her mother's love hadn't ended. It had multiplied. It was now living through every person her story touched, every tear it helped release. Someday later, she decided to start something new, a small project she called the Unanswered Voices. She invited people to come together once a month and share the words they never got to say, to parents, to friends, to lovers who had gone too soon. The first night, only a handful of people showed up. By the third month, the room was full. Candles flickered, and voices shook with honesty. People cried, laughed, hugged strangers. And she would always end the night singing softly, her voice carrying everyone's pain and hope in a single breath. It became a movement. Videos from those nights began spreading online, reaching millions. Comments flooded in, People saying her voice helped them forgive, helped them call home, helped them heal. And every time she read those messages, she'd whisper, "You see, Mom? Your love didn't stop. It just changed direction." One morning, she received an email from a university. They wanted her to come speak to students about grief, art, and healing. She hesitated at first. She never thought of herself as someone who could teach. But then she remembered her mother's gentle voice saying, "You never know whose light you might turn on just by showing yours." She said yes. On the day of the talk, she stood before a room full of young faces. She told them her story, not with sadness, but with peace. She spoke about the missed calls, the guilt, the silence, and how all of it became her teacher. She ended by saying, "If there's someone you love, tell them. If there's something you regret, forgive yourself. Love doesn't disappear, it just waits for you to see it again." After the applause faded, one girl came up to her, crying softly.
"My mom's sick," she said.
"I've been too scared to talk to her about it. But after hearing you, I think I'm ready." The woman smiled through her own tears and hugged her tightly. "That's all she's ever wanted," she whispered. That night, when she got home, she sat by her window again, the same spot where her journey began. The city lights flickered below, and the stars looked like memories hung in the sky. She closed her eyes and listened. No phone ringing now, no silence heavy with regret, just peace. In that quiet, she felt something soft, like a hand brushing her hair, like a whisper only the heart can hear. "I'm proud of you," it said. She opened her eyes slowly, smiling through the tears that no longer hurt. Her phone was on the table beside her, the same one that once carried all her pain. She picked it up and, out of habit, opened her mom's contact. It was still there, unchanged. She didn't delete it. She never would. It wasn't just a name anymore. It was a reminder of everything she had become because of love, because of loss. And as the night deepened, she wrote one last note in her journal. "Love is not something we lose when someone dies. It's something we carry in our voices, in our stories, in every call we finally answer." She closed the book, placed it next to her mother's photo, and whispered softly into the quiet, "Good night, Mom." The wind outside shifted gently, almost like a reply. Years melted into memories, soft and quiet, the way sunlight fades through old curtains. She was older now, her hair streaked with silver, her hands lined with stories only time could write. But her heart, somehow, had grown lighter. She had learned to live gently, to carry her pain not as a wound, but as a whisper of who she once was. The world around her had changed, yet her small rituals stayed the same. A cup of tea at sunrise, music on rainy days, a flower by her mother's picture every Sunday. Her project, The Unanswered Voices, had grown beyond her imagination. People from all over sent letters, voice notes, and songs about their own lost connections. She listened to them late at night, each one like an echo of her own past. Sometimes she'd cry, sometimes she'd smile. She didn't need to respond to everyone. The act of listening felt sacred enough. One winter evening, she received a handwritten letter. It was from a young woman in another city. "My mother and I hadn't spoken in 2 years, the letter said. Your video appeared on my feed. I called her that night. She passed away 2 weeks later, but at least she heard me say I love you." She read those words again and again, the ink slightly smudged from her tears. She placed the letter beside her mother's picture and whispered, "You're still helping people, Mom." As she aged, her performances became fewer, but more intimate. Small living room gatherings, candlelit nights where people sat close and listened. Her voice had changed too, softer, rougher, more human. Each note carried the weight of 1,000 unsaid goodbyes, and yet there was peace in it. She wasn't chasing healing anymore. She was living it. One spring afternoon, she was invited to a local radio show, a quiet segment called Voices That Stay. She talked about her journey, how love sometimes speaks louder in silence. Near the end, the host asked her, "If you could say one last thing to your mom, what would it be?" She smiled, a long, peaceful smile, and said softly into the microphone, "Nothing. I'd just listen. Because I think she's been talking all along." The recording went viral. People shared it everywhere, not because it was sad, but because it was true. Her voice reached hospitals, classrooms, small towns, big cities, anywhere someone missed someone they loved. Years drifted by like the tide. Her steps grew slower, her hair whiter, but her spirit still warm, still full of music. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, she sat in her garden, surrounded by the flowers she had planted over the years. Each one had a story, a memory. She picked a single white rose, her mother's favorite, and held it gently. She thought about how everything had begun. One missed call, one choice, one silence that changed her forever. She realized now that regret had been a teacher, not a punishment. It had taught her to live fully, to speak gently, to love without waiting. A breeze brushed past, carrying the scent of jasmine. She closed her eyes. In the quiet, she heard her mother's laughter, faint, like an echo carried through years of distance. She smiled and whispered, "I'm not afraid of the silence anymore." Night fell slowly, wrapping the garden in silver light. She sat there until the stars came out, her breathing calm, her eyes fixed on the sky. Somewhere deep in her chest, she felt that familiar warmth again, the one that told her she wasn't alone. And as the world around her drifted into stillness, she whispered her last words to the wind. "Thank you for calling, Mom." This time I answered. The rain had stopped. Only the scent of wet earth remained, calm, alive, eternal. Inside the little apartment, the candle still burned beside her mother's picture, its flames swaying gently like a heartbeat that refused to fade. Morning arrived quietly, golden light spilling through the curtains. The nurse found her there, sitting by the window, a faint smile resting on her lips, her hands folded over her journal. She looked peaceful, as if she had just fallen asleep in the middle of a dream. They opened her notebook later that day. On the final page, beneath the line, "Some goodbyes don't end anything, they begin everything," there was a small pressed white rose. Next to it, one more sentence, written in shaky but graceful letters. "When we learn to forgive, we finally find our way home." That line went viral the next morning, shared by millions across the world. Not because it came from a famous writer, but because it came from someone who had lived through pain, learned to love again, and left behind a reminder that healing doesn't come from forgetting, it comes from remembering differently. Her story became a message. Her voice became a bridge. Strangers started calling their parents. Broken hearts began to mend. Across oceans and time zones, her words traveled, reminding everyone that even silence can hold forgiveness, and even endings can become beginnings. And somewhere, far beyond the rain and the noise, she was finally home, with the one voice she had always wanted to hear again. The call was finally answered. Sparkles the end sparkles.